Hey class, this is chapter 25 of Exile from the Keeper of the Lost Cities series. And if you didn't check out my video that I posted before this, whoa, I almost just fell off the couch. If you didn't look at that video I just posted before this on YouTube, it was a little message to you and directions for the activities that I posted on Google Classroom. So you might want to go and check that out on my YouTube channel, which is just very creatively called Mari Kart Leahy. So go ahead and look that up, and let's go ahead and start. Chapter 25. Sophie tightened her grip on Alden's wrist, forcing herself to stay connected as a flood of images poured through his mind. She tried not to focus on them, tried to let them all wash through her consciousness. I have a really hard time with that word. Consciousness, and fade away. But the Everblaze burned too brightly to be ignored. Oh, they're in Finton's brain. Got it. She watched through Finton's eyes as he and 5 other elves in deep orange capes stretched their arms towards the sky. She felt his head throb as he concentrated on the tiny pricks of heat radiating from the twinkling stars. But he focused through the pain and counted to 3. Together as one, the 6 of them called the warmth down to earth. For a second, the heat ignored them. Then, 6 lines of neon yellow flames streaked toward the elves, gaining speed with every second. The others gasped and backed away, but Finton held his ground, opening his palms and ordering the fire to bend to his will. The flames twisted and coiled into an elephant-sized fireball that hovered above him. So he's literally controlling the fire. Crazy. Tears pricked his eyes as he soaked up the power of a purer, richer, more magnificent fire than had ever graced the earth before. But the blaze refused to stay contained, and the fireball erupted, raining bits of scattered flame. Finton shielded his face with his cape, but the falling sparks attached to the fireproof fabric and ignited. He tossed the garment to the hungry flames and jumped through the fire line, tumbling across a patch of cool grass that hadn't yet succumbed to the blaze. Coughs racked his chest, and his skin was red and raw and throbbed with a pain he didn't understand, like being stabbed by hundreds of scalding needles. His first burns. But he was alive, and he was alone. Flashes of orange thrashed among the yellow flames, and Finton stumbled to his feet, realizing they were the figures of his friends. He shouted at the heat to subside, but the blaze swelled higher, crackling like it was laughing at him. All he could do was watch their agonized faces as the fire attacked. Then he dropped to his knees and vomited. Hold, please. Install. Try an error. Okay. Sophie felt like doing the same. She tried to shove the horror out of her mind, but it was like the memory was seared behind her eyes. She could only watch helplessly as Finton fumbled for his Pathfinder, hating himself for ignoring the bone-chilling cries of his friends as he held it up to the light. Before he glittered away, the memory shattered. Sophie yanked her consciousness back at the scene, splintering to a million glinting shards that were swallowed by the darkness of Finton's mind. Alden groaned. "Are you okay?" she asked, squeezing his wrist. "He's destroying the things he doesn't want me to see. I have to work faster. Brace yourself." The shower of images turned into an icy downpour, then to a raging flood. But the memories kept warping and twisting, and when Alden tried to focus them, they vaporized to a thick fog that clouded everything. "His ancient mind is too strong," Alden told her. "If I'm going to salvage any memories, I need you to boost me with your concentration." "How do I do that?" "Send some of your energy into his mind. It's like transmitting, but with force instead of words. Can you do that?" "I'll try." Sophie shoved any other thoughts out of her head and pulled all of the energy stored in her inner core into her mind. It tingled and hummed as she wrapped her consciousness around it, and when she had a firm hold, she shoved it into Finton's head, filling it with warmth. The thick fog thinned, but didn't melt away. I'll have to find another way, Alden told her, but his mental voice sounded weary. Wait, let me try something. Mental energy seemed to be more powerful than core energy. Maybe a brain push was what they needed. She focused on the energy buzzing at the edge of her consciousness, letting it surge and swell until her head felt ready to explode from the pressure. Ready? She transmitted, not wanting to catch Alden off guard. On 3, he replied. 1, 2, 3. She pushed the mental energy out of her head in a rush of heat. It wasn't until the force collided against the other energy that she remembered her disastrous splotching match against Fitz, the first time she'd performed a brain push. Mental energy and core energy couldn't mix, and with the two trapped inside one mind, they twisted and swirled around each other, forming a cyclone of heat that made Finton scream. Sophie panicked, trying to draw the energy back, but Alden ordered her to wait. She held her breath as the vortex of energy wound tighter and tighter. Finally, the pressure was too much, and it collapsed and imploded, melting away the mental fog and revealing a memory hidden underneath. An elf in long red robes. The features of his face were a murky blur of shadow and color, but Sophie watched through Finton's eyes as he helped the elf stretch out his arm and curl his fingers into some sort of very specific fist and point it at the sky. Then Finton jumped back as the elf flicked his wrist and a small ball of neon flame sprang to life, hovering above his palm. Everblaze. Alden tried to force the memory into focus, but before he could, Finton shouted and a wave of heat shot up Alden's arm, burning Sophie's hand. The scene shattered. The entire stream of memories cracked and splintered, crumbling into tiny, unrecognizable shards. Sophie pulled her concentration back before she was sucked into the chaos, but she felt Alden's consciousness slip away, leaving her suddenly cold. She ripped her eyes open as his wrist slipped from her grasp and his body hit the floor with a thump. Her head throbbed and her hand ached, but she ignored the pain as the room came into focus. Finton sat slumped in his chair, muttering incoherently. Alden lay unconscious, a large gash on his forehead streaking his face with red. Her stomach heaved at the sight, and she tried not to look at the blood as she dropped to her knees and grabbed him by the shoulders. What happened? Krikor asked, rushing into the room as Sophie shouted Alden's name and tried to shake him awake. I don't know. He must have hit his head when he fell. She shook Alden again, but it made no difference. Neither did Krikor, slapping Alden's cheeks. Krikor wiped the blood away from the fur of his arm and examined the wound. Then he pried Alden's eyelids open, frowning at the blank whites. I do not think the problem is physical. Sophie glanced at Finton, who was rocking back and forth. His cracked lips were turned up at the ends in a twisted smile. Could he have dragged Alden down with him? Tears turned everything to a blur, but Sophie blinked them back. Now was not the time for crying. Now was the time to be a guide. She placed her shaky fingers against Alden's temples, transmitting his name over and over as she pushed her consciousness into his mind. His head felt cold and dark and was hauntingly quiet. No whisper of thoughts, no trace of memories. It was like Alden was gone, and she was wading through an empty shell. You promised nothing would go wrong, her mind screamed as she fanned out her thoughts, trying to feel in every direction at once. The cold pounded against her brain, and a tiny trickle felt like it was seeping in. But as she waded through the darkness, she found something warmer, clearer somehow. She followed the feeling until she reached what felt like a small space, a warm nook. But it was empty too. Come back, she ordered him. We need you. She filled the space with memories of Fitz and Della and Bianna, the people who loved Alden and needed him and would never be the same if he left them. You have to come back for them. A tiny speck of light flashed through the darkness. Sophie wrapped her consciousness around it, like cupping her hands around a fledgling flame, shielding it so that shadows couldn't snuff it out. She fed it more images of Alden's family and friends and pulled it into the nook. a safe place to let it grow. Brightness and warmth seeped around her, flooding the space with memories, happy scenes of family and friends. She stared at her own face, surprised to find herself in the mix. Then Alden's mind whispered, "I'm here." Whew, that was a good one. Stay tuned for chapter 26, Mañana, which is Spanish for tomorrow.